It's a chilly afternoon, the kind where the wind cuts through your clothes and makes you shiver. The streets are busy, cars whizzing by in all directions. The world seems in a hurry, but amidst all the noise and movement, there's one quiet figure standing alone. A young boy, no older than 12, sits on the curb, his knees drawn up to his chest, his arms wrapped around them in a futile attempt to keep warm. His clothes are ragged, torn at the edges. His shoes are worn out, the soles barely holding together. His face is dirty, his eyes dull, staring at nothing in particular. There's no smile, no hope, just the weight of survival pressing down on him. Across the street, a sleek black car pulls up to a stop at the traffic light. The man driving it is the complete opposite of the boy, a picture of wealth and success. He wears a tailored suit that fits perfectly, his shoes polished to a shine. His watch gleams in the sunlight, the only sign that this man has everything but time. His eyes scan the street, seemingly lost in thought, but then his gaze lands on the boy sitting on the curb. For a moment he just watches. There's a sense of something, compassion maybe, or curiosity, that passes across his face. He looks at the boy for a second longer before his hand moves to roll down the window. The cold air rushes in, but it doesn't seem to bother him. He leans forward, watching the boy. The light turns green, but the man doesn't drive off just yet. Something holds him there, something he can't ignore. The man takes a deep breath, almost as if to prepare himself. Then, without hesitation, he pulls the car over to the side of the road, just a few feet from the boy. The engine hums quietly, almost as if it's waiting too. The boy doesn't notice at first. He's too caught up in his thoughts, in the cold, in the hunger gnawing at his stomach. But then the sound of the car door clicking open catches his attention. He looks up, surprised, as the man leans out of the window and speaks. "Hey there," the man says, his voice warm, steady. "It's a bit too cold for someone your age to be out here like this. Where are you headed?" The boy doesn't answer right away. He looks up at the man, studying him for a second. There's something unfamiliar about this person. Someone dressed so well, driving such a nice car. People like him don't usually stop for kids like him. People like him just walk by, pretend they don't see. I don't know," the boy stammers, his voice barely audible. "I don't have anywhere to go." The man nods slowly, his eyes softening. He can see the fear and uncertainty in the boy's eyes, but there's also something else, something that tells him this isn't the first time the boy's had to fend for himself. The man leans in a little closer, his voice low but sincere. "You know," he says, "I'm headed in the same direction. I can give you a ride, if you want. It's a lot warmer in here than it is out there." The boy hesitates. He looks at the car, then back at the man, and for a brief moment, he wonders if this is some kind of trick, but something in the man's face tells him it's not. There's kindness there. The boy's instincts are usually sharp, and this time they tell him it might be safe. After a moment, the boy nods, his eyes still wary, but there's a spark of hope in them now. "Okay," he says softly, stepping toward the car. The man smiles, a genuine smile, and opens the door wider. "Good decision," he says. "Let's get you out of the cold." The boy slides into the car, his eyes wide as he takes in the interior. The leather seats are soft and smooth beneath him, and the air inside is warm, almost too warm compared to the biting cold outside. He shifts uncomfortably, unsure of what to do with his hands. The car smells like expensive cologne, and the soft hum of the engine fills the silence. The man glances over at him as he starts to drive, the city skyline passing by in the distance. He doesn't rush though, driving slowly, as if giving the boy a moment to adjust. So the man starts, his voice calm. "What's your name?" The boy hesitates again, unsure if it's okay to share. After all, people don't usually care about his name, don't usually bother asking. But something about the man feels different. "Jake," he says quietly, looking out the window. "Jake Stevens." "Nice to meet you, Jake," the man says, nodding. He pauses for a moment, his eyes on the road, but then he asks, "Where are you from?" Jake shifts in his seat, fidgeting. "I don't really have a place. I've been moving around a lot," the man nods, as if he expected that answer. "You don't have to explain, I get it." The car turns onto another street, the lights of the city flickering past them. The man glances at Jake, his eyes filled with an understanding the boy isn't used to seeing from strangers. You know, the man continues, it's tough out there. Life's hard sometimes, but it's not the end of the road, there's always a way through. Jake looks at him, his eyebrows furrowing. You don't know what it's like, he says softly, the words coming out almost bitter. No one does. The man doesn't react right away. Instead, he keeps his eyes on the road, and gives a small smile. Maybe not, he says gently. But I think you'd be surprised at how many people have been where you are. You just have to hold on. Just a little longer. Jake doesn't answer. He just watches the passing lights, lost in thought. He's heard people say things like that before, but it never felt real. It never felt like someone actually meant it. But there's something in the man's voice, in the way he speaks, that makes Jake wonder if maybe this time is different. The car continues to glide through the streets, the sound of tires on asphalt filling the silence. Jake tries to relax, but he's still unsure, still keeping his guard up. The man notices the tension, and without missing a beat, he starts speaking again, his tone quieter this time, almost as if he's telling Jake a secret. You know, the man says, glancing briefly at him, before returning his attention to the road. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always the guy in the fancy car with everything figured out. Jake glances over, surprised. He wasn't expecting that. I grew up on the streets, the man continues, his voice steady, but with a trace of something darker beneath it. Just like you. I know what it's like to go days without eating, to sleep in places that make you feel like you don't even matter. Jake looks at him now, his curiosity piqued. The man doesn't seem like the type of person who'd know what that feels like. He seems so far removed from all of it, so different. But the sincerity in his voice makes Jake hesitate to dismiss him. I don't know how I made it through, the man says, his eyes distant, as if he's reliving it. I didn't have anyone back then, not like you do now. He glances at Jake. No one to help me, no one to care. I had to figure it out on my own, and it wasn't easy. Jake is listening now, his eyes wide. He can't imagine this man ever being in a position like him. It seems impossible. Were you homeless? Jake asks, the words slipping out before he can stop them. He's almost afraid of asking, afraid of what the answer might be. The man nods slowly. Yeah, I was. For years actually. I didn't have a choice. I was just a kid, and the world didn't care. I had to survive however I could. Sometimes that meant stealing. Sometimes it meant begging, but eventually I realized I couldn't keep going down that path. I had to change. Jake's mind is racing now. This man, the one sitting next to him, the one with the expensive suit and the luxury car, was once just like him. It doesn't make sense. I started working odd jobs, anything I could find. It was rough, but I kept pushing forward. I didn't give up, even when it felt like there was no way out. Slowly I worked my way up. Little by little, the car takes a turn, and the man's eyes flicker to Jake again. I won't lie, he says, his voice quieter now. There were times when I thought about giving up, times when I didn't know if I could keep going. But something inside me wouldn't let me quit. Jake swallows hard, his heart racing. This is unreal. How could this man have lived through that and come out the other side with all this success? The man leans back in his seat, his eyes focused on the road ahead. The thing is, he continues, it's not about where you start, it's about where you end up. And if you want to get there, you've got to keep moving, even when it feels impossible. Just keep going. Jake doesn't know what to say. The man's words sink in, and for the first time in a long while, he feels a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different for him too. The car drives on through the city, and for a few moments the silence stretches between them. Jake is lost in his thoughts, trying to process everything the man just shared. His mind is spinning, and it's hard to wrap his head around the fact that this man, who seems so distant from everything he's known, was once living the same kind of life he is now. After a while, the man speaks again, breaking the silence. You know, there was someone who helped me once, he says, his voice a little softer. A stranger. I was just a kid, no one cared, but this man, He took me in when I was at my lowest. Jake looks up, surprised. Really? The man nods. Yeah, I was out on the streets, freezing and starving, and this man, he had everything. A big house, a successful business. I thought he'd never stop, just keep walking past me like everyone else did. But he didn't. He stopped and offered me a chance. He gave me a place to stay, and told me that I could change my life, if I was willing to work for it. Jake's mind is reeling, he can't believe what he's hearing. The man, the rich one in the car, was helped by someone else. Someone just like him. I don't know what I would have done without him, the man says, his voice getting quieter. He didn't owe me anything, but he helped. And I promised myself, that if I ever made it out of that life, I would do the same for someone else. Jake shifts in his seat, trying to make sense of it all. So that's why you're helping me? He asks, his voice small. You just want to pay it forward. The man smiles, his expression soft and genuine. That's part of it. But it's more than that. I see something in you, Jake. I see someone who's been through a lot, but who's still holding on. And that's something I can respect. Jake is quiet for a moment. He's never heard anyone say something like that to him before. It's strange, hearing someone believe in him when he's spent so long believing no one ever would. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, the man adds, his tone serious now. Life doesn't just hand you things, no matter who you are, but I can promise you this: there's always a chance for a fresh start. You just have to take it. Jake is staring out the window now, his thoughts swirling. He's never been given a chance like this before. The idea of someone seeing him, really seeing him, and offering to help is almost too much to believe. The man looks over at him once more, his eyes kind and patient. You're not alone, Jake. Not anymore. The car slows to a stop, and for a moment Jake doesn't understand. He looks around, trying to figure out where they are. The city streets are quieter here, the buildings not as tall, and the air feels fresher somehow. Where are we? Jake asks, his voice hesitant. The man doesn't answer right away. Instead, he pulls the car over to the side of the road, and parks. He turns off the engine, and the car becomes eerily quiet, as though it's waiting for something to happen. Jake looks at him, confused, but the man just smiles gently. You've probably been wondering why I offered you a ride in the first place, the man says, his voice calm. And why I've been telling you all of this about my past. Jake nods slowly, unsure of where this is going. He hadn't really thought about it much, he'd been too caught up in the ride, in the strange kindness of the man beside him, but now, as they sit there in the stillness, he wonders if there's something more to all of this. I'm not just offering you a ride, Jake. The man continues, his voice steady, but with an intensity Jake hadn't heard before. I'm offering you something else, something that could change everything for you. Jake's heart begins to race. What do you mean? He asks, his voice small. The man reaches into his coat pocket, and pulls out a small envelope. He holds it out to Jake, who hesitates before taking it. Inside the envelope is a set of keys, and a piece of paper with an address written on it. Jake looks at the man, confusion clouding his thoughts. What is this? Jake asks, staring down at the keys in his hand. The man's eyes soften, and he leans forward slightly. It's a place, a new start for you. I own an apartment just around the corner. I want you to take it. It's yours. Jake's eyes widen, the words barely sinking in. But, why would you do that for me? The man shrugs, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Because I can. And because I remember what it's like to need someone to believe in you. To need someone to show you a way out. Jake is speechless, he can't believe what he's hearing. A place. A home. For him. I want you to have a chance to rebuild, the man says, his voice quiet but firm. But it's up to you. I'm giving you the tools, but the work is yours. The choice is yours. Jake's mind is spinning. He looks down at the keys again, his heart pounding in his chest. This isn't just a ride anymore. This is a chance. A chance he never thought he would get. Jake stares at the envelope in his hands, still in disbelief. His heart races as he looks from the keys to the man beside him, trying to process what just happened. A place. A real home. It feels impossible. He's lived his whole life bouncing from place to place, barely surviving, never knowing where he would sleep, or if he'd have enough to eat. But now, there's something tangible in his hands. A chance. A place. To call his own. You really mean it? Jake whispers, his voice shaky. He can hardly find the words to express what he's feeling. His eyes are wide, and he's fighting back tears. The thought of someone, a stranger, offering him so much is overwhelming. The man simply nods, a soft smile on his face. I mean it, Jake. It's yours, if you want it. But I want you to understand, this is just the first step. There's a long road ahead of you, but if you take it, you can make something of yourself. You can turn things around. Jake swallows hard, his throat tight. He can hardly breathe as he tries to take in everything. It feels like a dream, too good to be true. But the keys in his hands feel real. The apartment. The fresh start. It's all within reach. For the first time in as long as he can remember, Jake feels a spark of hope. Maybe he can change. Maybe things can be different. Thank you, Jake says, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you so much. The man gives a small nod, his smile warm and reassuring. You don't have to thank me, just make the most of it. You've got this, Jake. And as Jake looks at the keys once more, he knows something has changed. The road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time, he believes that it might just be worth walking.